There we go. That's better with sound. Let's put it in front of me so I can actually... There you go. Hopefully that's better. Let me know if you can hear me fine while I just light the mosquito killer. Yeah, Italian mosquitoes are like the epitome of parasites. There isn't another creature on earth that is as vicious as Italian mosquitoes. They're silent, so tiny they're almost invisible to the eye, and they will bite you through your clothes, and you can only see them in a very short range of distance, and only if you've got a very white background. They will dive bomb, they will dodge, they will go behind cupboards. They're like super intelligent, like imagine like a human was inside a mosquito and piloting it. It's basically what they're like. And oops, yeah, just my mosquito coil was the whole thing was half on fire. Hello, Slanty Chauffeur Bear and Cooper Chauvin. Hello, Cooper Chauvin. Good, glad to hear that you can hear me. I've got a cold one in the freezer, so in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that, when the fancy takes me, I'm going to go and get a Corona while I finish this tiny drop of white wine which I left over from lunch. Farmer Grady Hooger. Hello, sir. Long time no see. I've got a fan going, but hopefully that's not bugging you guys too much. Right, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. Anne Heche car crashed. Car crashed as a verb into a body bag, which she zipped herself out of and was like, "No, I'm still alive," and they just shut her down, put her in an ambulance, and off she was to the morgue. So apparently she was busy doing a film with I think a senator as well, which died in a car crash a week before her. These two women were involved in doing a film about child trafficking. There's a guy recently who did on Gab, he released about a few minutes video where he's basically saying, I'm just going to talk about the child sex, slavery, satanic trafficking and so on. And he did a film, and when the whole Me Too movement came out, I forgot his name. He was the producer on the Hunger Games, I think. He was involved in the Hunger Games in a pretty big way. And he was when the Me Too movement came out, he was talking to these women, some of which he knew quite well, and they were quite famous actresses and so on. And he was like, but what about the kids? And they're like, oh yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? But nobody talks about it. So I've known about this stuff since at the very least, the early 90s. In fact, I'd started writing a fiction book about a guy that finds out, some of the things that I found out about what really goes on at high levels of governments, in pretty much all governments, and who just gets pissed off and decides to take as many of these fuckers out as possible. But it wasn't really much of a plot, and so it was a pretty dark kind of book to write. It was in the vein of, I think the guy's name is Andrew Vax, if I remember. I'm not sure to pronounce it. He's got a patch on one eye, and he worked with Child Protection Services, and he wrote a series of books where there's basically this, essentially, a bad guy, a guy who kills people, but he basically kills pedophiles, and he's not really a bad guy, kind of like Dexter. And he married a woman that's also in Child Protection Services or something, and he was basically saying that the whole system is completely corrupt, and that's why he wrote these books. Now, I don't know anything else about the guy other than I read a couple of his books, and they were gritty. I mean, they were gritty for me. That sort of make you go, ooh. There's another author that I like very much, a very good writer, who was also a journalist, but I think probably an actual journalist, because he despised journalists in his novels, which he wrote, God's Pocket and Brotherly Love. His name is Pete Dexter, and the reason I remember this guy's name is because reading a Pete Dexter book just like kills a little piece of your soul. He writes beautifully, you know, in a way that I really like. I mean, he's got a very good style, you know, like Anne McCaffrey, the one who wrote I, Vampire and whatever, you know, she'll write 4 pages to describe a leaf falling off a tree to tell you that, you know, it's autumn or something. Pete Dexter would say winter, full stop, and then another sentence. It really moves it along very, very fast, but depressing as hell. But, you know, a really good writer. And I'm nowhere near as good a writer as Pete Dexter, I think. But it would have been a book in that kind of vein. It sort of like destroys you a little bit to write that sort of stuff. And you gotta have a pretty hard mind not to be become very despondent if you realize how the world really works. So, and unfortunately, there's no easy way around it. You know, my approach to it is pretty much, well, if you can get some uncontrovertible proof, shove it in a normie's face and just say, that's what's happening. Fucking wake up. Because it needs to happen. And quite frankly, if the normal average person knew what was really going on, I think governments would change overnight, because I would like to think that at least 10% of the male population would still have enough of an oomph to like change things immediately by whatever means necessary. But, you know, until we get to that level of awareness, or the Great Awakening, as some people would like to call it, I don't know that it's ever going to happen. Anyway, it's a free Q&A. Even the gammas will get a free shot, unless they blaspheme, of course. If they say some stupid thing about Mary or Catholics or whatever, then they're instant banned. But even if you're a gamma, you get a free question. At least one free question, and you'll get a warning if it's a stupid, evil one. But, you know, you can ask. Or bring up a topic, whatever you want. In the meantime, I'll just ramble on about whatever comes into my head and read the chat. I want this one to be a bit of an interactive one. There's already 14 of you, so that's good. Oh, good. Pharmagrady tells me the fan in the background is very audible. Not a problem. That's great, because I kind of need it. We're not even in the full heat of summer. We've had that for a few days, and it's sexy beast level of sweltering. If you've ever seen the film, it starts off like that. This guy in Spain with a little fan, which I've got, by the way. I've got one right here on my desk. This one's off, got a big one on. You know, just like this, sweltering, hot, sweltering. I'm a little bit less fat, you know, but yeah, I've had those days here, except I don't have a pool. So yeah. Buongiorno, mon ami, says Michael P. Hail Kurgan. Oh, thank you, sir. Bright says, Ave Kurgan. Can't stay, but wanted to say at least. Most welcome, sir. Thank you. Matthew Clark, ground beef patty, charcoal flame, dinner, full. Pete Dexter. No, he's got more poetic way of doing things, but yeah, kind of, you know, he would probably just say like, oh, there's a scene where he talks about this dog attacking his little brother or sister or whatever, and it's just, it's grim stuff. And plus the way he, in his books, in his novels, he has, you know, journalists report on the events, and it's just like real life. Journalists just totally get it fucking wrong. It's completely not what happened. They get the wrong guy being the bad guy, the wrong guy being the good guy. They don't even have, you know, it's just like, what? And that's what appears in the newspaper. But that's how it is, you know. If you know anything about the news, or you ever been involved in anything that gets on the newspapers, then, well, yeah. NR says, do you think the collapse of the West is happening on purpose? Absolutely, yes. Not just on purpose, but has been, you know, carefully orchestrated for decades. Michael P. says, average people say they want to know the truth, but most people will be normacy based against the truth. They should be eased in and should believe they are the ones making the connections. Yeah, that was the whole point behind the supposed the Q, trust the plan thing. It's like to gently wake up the normies. Whatever faults or goods or bads Trump had, one thing he did do, I think, very well was he exposed the international media, really, for the bunch of lying hyenas that they are. What's your thoughts on the JQ? I'm on Gab. You can probably get an idea there. As you know, YouTube doesn't necessarily allow certain topics to be discussed in depth. But I've mentioned it before that I was, when I was 7 years old, I was given the task of doing a project on Germany. We had a geography class that each kid got a country, and I got Germany. And that's when I first, came across the whole World War II, Nazi concentration camps, the Holocaust. Just all because one guy could, apparently really talk well. It just didn't make any sense. So I probably seen most of the documentary series that the BBC released about the rise of Nazism, the rise of Hitler, all that stuff. I've bought several books on Nazism, mostly to be fair, concerned with the Wunderwaffen, because the Germans were way ahead in terms of technology, in terms of stealth technology, in terms of energy technology, in terms of anti-gravity technology. They're the ones that invented the jet, so they were ahead in terms of that, because they had a German company briefly, which ended up suing because the amount of fraud going on there was just ridiculous. And unfortunately, in that company, the Germans there, except for one East German guy who was brilliant, he was a cool dude, but the other guys, they were almost like caricatures of shouty, dumb Germans. So that didn't do me any favors. And slowly over time, I started to become aware of other things, like how the maths didn't work out, how even in Auschwitz, I believe they have revised the number down several million, and it's still, the maths doesn't make sense. The chimney at Auschwitz was built after the thing was liberated, and so on. Sam Wereb says, delighted. Michael P., have you read Joe Abercrombie? His prose is like work candy and yet direct. Excellent writer. Is Joe Abercrombie the guy who wrote some Warhammer 40,000? I'm not sure. If that's the guy, I have read some of it and I find him sort of unreadable. But, as the Latins used to say, the Romans, de gustibus. So you can't account for taste. Unicorn Cupcake, one of the gammas. Let me take a sip while I read your comment. What do you think would happen if China took over a majority, 55%, of the West? What will the world look like? Slightly shade of yellow? I don't know. Probably worse than it looks now, I think, because my grasp of Chinese culture is not particularly deep, but I do have some knowledge of it, and I'm quite happy with my culture, and I don't necessarily want it influenced at all by theirs. I'm quite happy for them to have theirs over there and keep mine over here. So I think it would be a lot more regulated. In some ways it would be more free, but in many other ways that would look absurd to us, would be very stringent. Who knows? Time will tell. He who survives will know. Michael P. says, no, the first Law trilogy. Then no, I probably am, no. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I probably haven't read it. What are your thoughts on 125 to 130 IQ individuals? Well, it's a broad generalization, but I find them irritating for the most part. You know, with obviously exceptions, but I heard you're 115 IQ. I got tested twice for IQ, and I scored 157 the first time, which I thought, that's ridiculous, I can't be that smart. So I did another official test, and I scored 152, because I was really trying for that one. The first one I was relaxed and just taking it easy. This was, you know, many years ago. I was 26 or so at the time, 25, 26, something like that. I haven't taken one since, and I didn't put much stock in it at the time. It was many years later that I found out about the IQ gap, and suddenly a whole bunch of things click. 120 to 130 IQ individuals can be, you know, 130 IQ, 125, they can start to understand me, and we can start to talk on a similar level, because the 30-point IQ gap is, you know, narrowed down there. But quite often they think they're the smartest person in the room, because that's been their experience, you know. To give you an idea, 125, 130 IQ, I think, is something like one in a few hundred or maybe 1,000. 1 in 150 IQ is 1 in 10,000, and I'm probably a little bit above that. So, but I've met people that are smarter than me, that have got a higher IQ than me anyway. That doesn't mean they're necessarily anywhere near as effective. IQ doesn't necessarily relate to your ability to engage with the world. Certainly people with over 130 IQ do not tend to be as successful as traditionally thought by most people. Most doctors, judges, and so on are like about 120, 130. 150, 160 IQ people tend to be like, you know, the Unabomber or sometimes social misfits, because there is that 30-point IQ gap. And in most cases, when you've got 150 plus IQ, you've got a 50-point IQ gap between you and the average person. You know, imagine if you're surrounded by people with Downs. You know, like, how would you go through life? You know, it can be lonely unless you're generally misanthropic, as I am, or you get inured to it. Maybe I am that way because I got callous to it. I don't know. And I've worked in companies where the average person probably had a 120, 130 IQ, and it was almost insufferable, because they were all pretty good at their job. They were all very good at their job, but they all thought they were the best guy at their job. And in their experience, and, you know, within the confines of the company, they probably thought they were doing all right. But in reality, their position was really due to a kind of sort of nepotism and politics, office politics, rather than raw ability. In fact, in that particular company, I was in charge financially of a project that, you know, doing all the contracts for all the subcontractors of a project that was geared to do 4.5%. And they were saying it was 5% because the project director couldn't do percentages. And in reality, it was like 4.5 or 4% because he'd screwed up the percentages. And at every meeting, he kept trying to blame oh, you know, it's 5%. And I said, no, it's 4.5. And he would like keep at every meeting, every board meeting, pretend that like it's my fault that I'd done it wrong. And eventually, after the fourth meeting, I got pissed off with it. And I said, no, Jim, you're wrong. And here's the email that you sent to the estimator who originally did the original quote on which we're all working off. And he wrote back to you and said, no, these are the values. And I confirmed it with him, and here's the email for that. So, sorry, but it's your mistake, Jim. You don't know how to do percentages. Didn't go down very well after that. But the fact remains that as a result of the contracts that I got signed and so on, I turned that 4.5 into a 9.2%. After which I was let go. So it had absolutely nothing to do with performance, nothing to do with making the company money. It had to do with whose ass you were going to kiss. And I've never been a good ass kisser, at least not unless you're a very pretty woman. And, you know, I'm now married, so that's limited to one pretty ass. So, Jake, Patton's memoirs, sorry, but to finish answering your question, when the 120, 130 IQ guy thinks he's the smartest person in the room and is not open to being corrected or seeing things in another way, what generally happens, they tend to think people like me are liars or deceivers or fraudsters because they can't understand how I can do the impossible and go from 4.5 to 9.2%, even when I show them the calculations, even when I show them the contracts, even when I show them the profit margins, when I literally put it in front of them, you know, black and white, color-coded if need be, on a very simple spreadsheet, they still don't get it and they think I'm just making it up because they can't understand it, they can't follow it, even when I walk them through it, and so they think I'm just, you know, I don't know, crazy or making it up. You know, Vox has got a very clever saying that he says, any sufficiently high intelligence is indistinguishable from madness, and that is for the lower IQ people. But, yeah. Sorry, Jake says, Patton's memoirs mentions odd concrete structures the Germans were working on and a dead German that was completely black. Is there anything to that? Yes, there is. It's called The Bell. I suggest you read either my book, The Face on Mars, or Joseph Farrell's books. He's written a bunch of books on that, like Nats International, I think Empire of the Black Sun, I think, and The Bell, the Nazi Bell, which explains that the Nazis were ahead and they were researching anti-gravity technology and so on. Unicorn Cup says, okay, I'm going out on a limb here. I pre-apologize, but does the Kurgan prefer wet pussy or juicy tits? Okay, you do. I did say that the gammas get a free one. I've always been more partial to the pussy than the tits. And R says, I've noticed that people in the 150 IQ range seem to view the world from a Gnostic point of view. Not necessarily. It depends how you've been raised, I suppose. You know, we live in a very secular world, so it's not surprising that maybe a lot of 150 plus IQ people think they're too smart for religion or something. You know, having 150 IQs, think of it like having a 7-liter turbo engine. There's an hour, you know, quickly. But that also means you can do the wrong thing and be in a very, very bad place very quickly too. You know, IQ is a sort of potentiality. It's not. It's certainly not a measure of ethics or wisdom. I personally, I'm not a particularly wise person. You know, if you turn thinking about it in terms of rural internet problems. I was saying about the bell curve where there's the drooling retard at the beginning of the curve with like low IQ and he's like, God is love. And then you've got like the bell curve with all the midwits and all the normal people and so on, which is like, hey, religion is so outdated. Why do you believe in a spaghetti monster? And then there's the end of the bell curve where you've got the super geniuses that are like, God is love. You know, so it's pretty much there. That's what I think. A lot of the very let's say good physicists, they were all pretty strong believers in God, like Bohm and people like that. Forgive me, but I am thirsty. So, you know, if you think about it, Newton, who is vaunted as, that extra genius scientist, Newton wrote volumes more about religion, being a Catholic, than he did about physics. Most people don't even know that. Let's see where I was before the little interruption there. Okay. Where were we? Yes. Unicorn cupcake with a pussy or tits question. Michael P says discipline is greater than IQ. Yeah, I very much agree with that to in a lot of cases, I've also put in my Systema book that I think courage is more important than intelligence, or wisdom in some cases as well, and that imagination is more important than intelligence. I've certainly known people that are almost certainly quite a bit below 100 IQ points that I would trust more and have, spend a lot more time with than people that have 130 IQ points who are completely dishonest scum. So, Pharma Grady says, have you looked into the claims of cutting stone with vibrating wire? Feasible? I've heard all sorts of things about moving stone with vibration, cutting stone. I think almost anything in that realm is possible. Those of you that have been following the Gasifier project on Kickstarter, if you go on Kickstarter and you type in Gasifier, you'll see my project there. Know that I'm looking at possibly, if we hit the fourth stretch goal, building a little graviter, which is something that Thomas Townsend Brown built, which was a kind of a cell, which when you apply electricity to it, has a gravitic effect. There's some fireworks going on. It's some kind of holiday or feast of a saint or something here. I don't know what it is. Anyway, if we hit that stretch goal, I'm going to build little examples of it and do videos and a document about how to build one, if I get it right. So if you haven't sponsored the Gasifier yet, there's still a few days. I think we're like 5 or 4 days left before it closes down, and it's almost like 400% sponsored now. So there's a little bit of ways to go to get to the stretch goal number 4, but it was very quickly funded, and traditionally Kickstarter campaigns get funded mostly at the beginning and at the end, so now would be the time when, if it happens, it's going to happen. Michael P says, probably social dysfunction at NR, but this is not 100% because there are those people who integrate well. Yeah, like the 150 plus IQ and being Gnostic or not necessarily socially very together, let's say. But then, also, people like the psychopath test and stuff like that. These are tests that are done, I've taken plenty of those tests because I studied neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis for a bunch of years and so on. And for a while, at first, I wasn't sure what the hell was going on with those tests because I would test weird. Even the people that did the tests couldn't figure out what really was going on until it took me a while to figure it out. But my primary mode of processing information is kinesthetic, but to such a degree that they don't know how to measure it. And that's why I sometimes get intuitive senses about things or people that I myself for a long time couldn't tell you even. I still can't necessarily tell you exactly how I know certain things about people or somebody I just met, but I do. And some of it at least apparently has to do with micro expressions and micro your ability to perceive very minute changes in a person's pupil dilation, skin coloration, and so on, heartbeat rate, and so on. And there was a show on TV several years back called Lie to Me, I think, with Tim Roth in it as the main guy. It was a series about this guy who does that and watches people lying and so on. And in the very first pilot episode, they get this TSA agent, this woman, who's a natural. She hasn't had any training in the stuff, but she just can do it. And there are people like that, and I do follow. So there is, you can get the ability to integrate very well in society with a high IQ, but it's kind of work because, imagine like, Planet of the Apes, and would you be able as a human to really get along with the chimps or whatever, yeah, probably can if you really try, but it's kind of tiring and not necessarily that interesting. NR says, yeah, that's something I've picked up on about people 150 plus. They seem almost schizophrenic in their way of thinking. Yeah, I would put it another way. I think that anybody with an IQ of about 150 plus is autistic in some way, or has got blind spots or whatever. And even people like, like Vox, I think he denies having necessarily blind spots. But I perceive he has some. I know I have some, and I don't even present as any kind of autist really, but I do. I've certainly got a touch of Asperger's. It's just that my meta skill, if you like, most Asperger's or people with a slight tinge of autism tend to specialize in one or two things, and they become really, really super good at it, better than most other humans. So people think, oh, he's a genius at that. Now, I certainly met a guy like that, an architect, who was very good at his job, but was socially completely awkward. Couldn't have a meeting, didn't know how to deal with people, and so on. My meta skill became the skill I became most good at is that I'm adaptable. I made my skill be that I can adapt to just about anything, and I can learn just about anything. And I have this very firm belief that if any other human has managed to do something, then I have at least the possibility to do it. And since I'm a pretty smart guy, the probability to do it. So that's why I've had a lot of different interests, and my interests are so varied. Even the books I've written, the non-fiction books, are like Russian martial arts, Catholic Christianity, the face on Mars, astronomy / edge of science stuff. And I'm writing now a short book about my neighbor who died, who was my friend, and I'm just writing a short book in Italian. And I've got many other interests, done hypnosis obsessively for a few years. I have a long history of hunting and shooting, working as a bodyguard, doing martial arts, and writing. I have a lot of different skills that I've developed over the years. I might not be, a world foremost entity at any one of them, but I am certainly better than most even good people at some of them. In terms of martial arts and some topics of writing, not necessarily the writing itself, but the topics that I covered, I'm definitely in the top 1% of the planet, if not 0.1%, which sounds like a huge achievement, but if you think about it, really, it's not. You're not saying that much. I mean, if you think about how many martial artists are in the world, it's not that many, and I've reached a very high level. I'm now in my 50s, so toning that down, and maybe I'll ever teach it, possibly. I don't know if I'll go back to that at some point. Certainly, I'm going to teach it to my kids and so on. But you have potentiality if you've got a high IQ. You'll see in the background there, that little bag, that's got my saxophone in it, which I haven't touched for over a year, but I'm going to get back there. Vagrant Theta says, what is your favorite ice cream? Oh, that's a tough question. When I was a kid, it used to be lemon, but now maybe fior di latte or stracciatella. Possibly one of those two. I'd say maybe stracciatella. NR, I've been called low IQ and banned from places for no reason, but my IQ is above average. Are they jealous or something which invokes their ban? It depends. It could be that you're socially unaware of certain things. It could be that you are just purely quite logical, and most human beings don't respond well to that because they get offended. When you tell, for example, a deep feminist that women can't do the things that men can do, she'll get very upset about it without realizing that it's merely a statement of fact, and the vice versa is true as well. So I don't know what to tell you, man. But remember, the digital world is not really real. It doesn't really matter. Sam Webb, I only began to figure out and understand how to deal with people when I started learning about the 4 temperaments as taught by the old Catholic Church. And that was just last week. Yeah, well, as long as you keep an open mind and you're open to facts, we're constantly learning. Actually, says the Waffen-SS were the elite soldiers from Germany, also known as the Schulstaffel. Yes, I know that. Currently in the, well, I wouldn't say the middle because I get interrupted, but I was reading a book by Leon de Graal, I think, who was a Waffen-SS from Belgium. And he explains why he became a Waffen-SS, which I thought was very interesting. I think Michael P must be a Sigma, because it was at NR. Yes, people hate high IQs like us. We're special boys and everyone wants our intelligence. Yeah, yeah, that's very good. But seriously, people don't like high IQs because they instinctually see it as a threat. Yeah, and not always for, it's a I think part of the reason that they hate a high IQ, even when they're not necessarily bad people or whatever, is because there's an element of unknown. It's somebody that they can't understand. They literally sometimes just cannot figure out how I get to the conclusion that I get to, and they see the results, it works, but it's an unknown. It's a scary thing. It's sort of like, this guy looks like a human, but maybe he's a lizard alien deep down or something. There is that aspect of it. And then there is, of course, the other aspect of it, which is like, if you're better read, intelligent, can speak a few languages and know a bunch of shit about all sorts of things, including some interesting topics, and you're now at a party and you walked in on your own and you start talking to some pretty girl who's surrounded by another 3 or 4 guys all trying their luck, and she walks away with you instead of them, they might get slightly upset. I know that firsthand because I've done that sort of thing a few times. So, yeah. Tough luck, normies, is kind of what I'd say on my way out with the girl. Michael Pecker continues, but seriously, people don't like to see it as a threat, and they don't mind high IQ if they integrate well with the group. Yeah, if you're, I came to this unfortunate conclusion quite a few years ago that if my communication with somebody is not going well, and I am a lot smarter than them, then the fault probably really lies with me, because, well, if I'm that smart, why am I not able to reach down to their level and communicate in a way that makes sense to them? I have struggled with that all my life, and I only became aware of the IQ gap in my 40s, so I have tried to make allowances since then, and I think most people think I'm a relatively pleasant person when they meet me in person, until they open their mouth and say some absurdly stupid shit that I can't fathom, and then I suddenly become very extremist from their perspective. But really, nothing's changed except that I've just expressed my belief system, while before I was just letting them assume some whole thing to a certain extent. I do believe that there were, like in any war, there were certainly atrocities committed by everybody, all sorts of people. But one thing that I found very interesting that somebody mentioned is that, do you notice that when they show you speeches of Hitler, they never translate what he's saying? It's just a shouty German guy. And I do remember I've only seen 2 translated speeches of Hitler, and one I saw many years ago where he was talking to his equivalent of parliament or whatever it was, and he read out a letter which I think was from the American president, and then he took that letter apart and responded to it as he was reading it. Clearly, I don't think it was scripted. I think it was off the cuff. And I mean, at one point, the whole of the German parliaments just laughed at the idiocy of the American. I certainly have always just assumed that the Nazis were completely always the bad guys, no matter what. But I found myself thinking, well, this American guy is really stupid, in what he was saying in the letter. And I don't remember the details, but it was something like, yeah, we're gonna beat you down and surround you, and you have to just take all the stuff on, and you're not allowed, and you shouldn't invade any country, including a list of countries. And the way that Hitler read it back, the part I remember, he was saying, oh yeah, and he says, we shouldn't invade this country and that country and that country, and everybody just burst out laughing, because it was what the hell, dude? You're putting guns to our heads and telling us what to do. We're gonna do what we want. That was kind of the attitude. And I'm now curious about what it would be like to listen to Hitler's speeches, with the translation. I don't speak German. I have some kind of a genetic rejection of the language, as I do with Afrikaans and mostly Dutch as well. It's just one of those languages that just, I just don't like the way it sounds. So I refuse to try and learn it. But I think it would be very interesting to see those speeches with a good translation on it now. Because I think it would explain a lot better why Germany did what it did and why it went the way it went. And of course, the things that Hitler is saying in those speeches, those few that I've managed to get some translation for, are certainly considered very anti-Semitic, I'm sure. And yet, I'm not sure that anybody has found, factual evidence against necessarily the economics or what he was saying or stuff like that. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I've also come across a website that I think is called, I can't remember, something like Revised History or something like that. But anyway, it's a bunch of academics that are actually going back to original documents and trying to figure out what really happened, and what the numbers in the Holocaust were and the numbers in the concentration camps and so on. There's a lot of stuff about what happened there that I think was probably best encompassed by that comedian who died recently. What was his name? Norm something. Anyway, there's a sketch of him like with this book saying, well, it says it right here in this book that luckily all wars were always won by the good guys. What are the chances of that, hey? And, you read the books. That's it. The good guys won, right? Michael P. says, doing many things well is better than being the best at one thing. My disposition is being generally better than most people, than most things if I try, but I generally can't be the best or top at it. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think I am in, like I said, the top of the people that do a certain activity in certain things, in a few things. But my overall best skill is to be a synergist, to be able to quickly evaluate a situation, and make decisions on the fly. I think tactically I'm very good at that sort of thing, whether it's in business or whatever. So we'll see. That doesn't mean I make wise choices. It means that despite my often reckless choices, I survive them. And that's a good skill to have. If you're curious and you're not afraid, that's a bad combination. You better have good reflexes and a smart brain. So, Jordan, I've been banned from everywhere for no reason. We've heard that one before. Now, I'm not sure if he's referring to a certain group of people or if he's referring to Owen Benjamin or who he's referring to, but I'm enjoying that comment. Michael P. I used to be socially inept, but I saw the pickup artists on YouTube years back and learned the general concepts. Now I'm pretty social. Yeah, well, pickup artists, good God. Deliver us. XD says, I think America would have joined up with Germany if it wasn't for the killing of the Jews to fight communism. What? If it wasn't for the killing of the Jews to fight communism? America's always been anti-communism, so I'm not sure what you're saying there. I don't know that I understand your comment. Anklon of Guerrero says, how many typewriters should one have? Well, I've got 3 that you can see, but I had, I think, at least 5. And quite frankly, the typewriter I'd really like to get is, you see the one in the box, in the wooden box there? That typewriter is the second iteration of the typewriter I'd really like to have. That thing was expensive. It was like over $300. And that was a few years ago. But it's a typewriter that your keys will never get jammed because it's got a roller wheel. I'm going to show it to you because it's such a cool thing. You need to see this. So, now, the roller wheel is in here, and I'm not going to bother taking it all out and putting it on. But the roller wheel goes here, and when you press one of these keys, see, there's the roller wheel thing. When you press one of these keys, that goes to hit the paper. And the wheel spins so that the letter that you've typed hits the paper. And that's how this thing works. this is not the one I want, because you'll see that this is a QWERTY keyboard. And the QWERTY keyboard was invented to slow you down. The reason for that is, of course, because if you type really fast on a QWERTY keyboard, this happens, and your keys all jam. So the QWERTY keyboard was designed to make it as difficult as possible for you to type fast. So, why does that wheeled typewriter have a QWERTY keyboard? This is the idiocy of humanity. Because the other typewriters, although inferior, were taking over the world by storm, and the QWERTY keyboard had come in, so the guy who did this typewriter said, well, these ones are selling more because everybody's using the QWERTY keyboard, so I'll put a QWERTY keyboard on off. This is the same reason why we don't have Zeppelins with aircrafts on it. Zeppelins attached, you know, with aircrafts attached, aircraft carriers in the sky. They existed. They had this. Do you know about that? Yeah? Same thing like the typewriter. So the original of that had a keyboard that was good and quick for you to type on. And if I can find one of those and I ever get really, you know, well off again, which, you know, I'm not right about the cool typewriter. That's what's happening here, obviously. So that's a really cool typewriter. So to answer the question, how many typewriters should a man have? As many as he can afford. In fact, we should all go back to writing on typewriters, and that's still something I want to do. I want to write a book on a typewriter and then use my phone to character read and put it onto the computer so that I can, you know, do the other stuff that needs doing for you to publish the book. Because it will force you to think more when you have to like correct every mistake that you make. Michael P. Concepts are better than specifics if you're trying to learn to interact with people. You're unique, and doing specific things makes you seem robotic. Yeah, indeed. XD, can you please make more World War II content? Yes, on Kurgan TV, I need to. I'm sorry, guys, I'm behind. I probably won't hit the 160 videos. We're probably going to hit about 120, 130 maybe. But I will give the people that are still signed up to Kurgan TV additional videos, even if they, you know, certain videos that we're making now for the Gasify or whatever, I'll put those up for the Kurgan TV people. I do have some other videos that I intend on making. It's just the amount of time that I have is very limited these days, for a number of reasons, one of which, you know, not least of which being my fifth kid on the way. But, you know, I am going to honor what I said I would do in one way or another. NR says, I really hate the 115 IQ guys that think they're so smart. It's so cringe. Okay, dude, you know, I think we've talked about IQ enough. XD says, very interesting. I subscribed. Oh, well, thank you. Make sure to spread the word. I don't know if you subscribe to the YouTube video or to the Gasifier, but whatever. You know, all good. Sam Wereb, I have had to explain the pronunciation of my last name when printed since day one of kindergarten. Kurgan got it on his first try, indicating a minimum 150 IQ, or he has a lot of Hungarian friends. No, I just read it as it's written, Wereb. I don't know. That seems pretty simple to me. Nice. Is the red one an Olivetti? Yes, it is. So I have a... the Imperial, which I gotta admit, you know I'm supposed to like the Olivetti, but I really like the Imperial. It just has that je ne sais quoi of English arrogance or something. I don't know. It's a beautiful machine, and I think it's the one that works best. It's very hard to find the what do you call it, the ink rolls for these things nowadays. I have to look online again. Although my really preferred one is that portable, I think it's German. Let me just check. I think it's German. I'm not sure. Remington typewriter. No, Remington typewriter, like the rifle. So it's made in the USA, so it's American. And that is ideologically my favorite typewriter. The Olivetti, you know, I kind of have to have a little bit of something for it just because of my nation. But the one I really like is the Imperial. And the Imperial is the most comfortable one to type on as well. Yes, I have used all of them in one way or another in some form. You know, not extensively. I haven't written a whole book on it, but yeah. XD says, my comment was confusing. I'm dyslexic and sometimes write things weird. I was saying if it wasn't for Germany doing super dark evil things in the 1940s, if they just were simply fighting communism. Yeah, maybe they were. It's hard to tell. It's been, you know, that one of the books that I found was most revealing for me about the Second World War was one written by a guy called Ravenloft, which I think is called The Spear of Destiny. And after he wrote that book, he was accused by various historians of being a liar and, you know, a deceiver and blah, blah, blah. However, these very same historians fudged numbers and did all sorts of things that were absolutely dishonest. So I don't put much stock in what they say. And this guy, Ravenscroft, I think is his name, or Ravensloft, I can't remember. He was a prisoner of war, so I doubt he was just making shit up. And what he did, he wrote about the occult element of the Nazi Party and of Hitler taking over Vienna and immediately going to the museum there and taking the spear of Longinus, the you know, the point of the lance that supposedly pierced the side of Jesus, and if you have that lance, you can't lose the war, sort of thing. So there was a lot of mysticism, a lot of occult beliefs in the Nazi Party, and that, you know, we know as a fact because there's surviving documents and so on. America would have joined Germany in a war with Russia to end communism. Well, I'm not sure that Germany wasn't just fighting communism. In fact, that's what the Nazi Party originally was doing. I think there could have been General Patton after World War II, we defeated the enemy. No, he actually said we defeated the wrong enemy. And I think, you know, he knew what he... And he died shortly after that. A lot of people think he was actually murdered or poisoned. I think that's possible. Daniel Pereira says, I have one electric, one mechanical. Can't use the mechanical because the the platen is harder than a rock. I'm not sure what the platen is. Add somewhere, but nobody can pronounce or spell my name, even when it is spelled out for them. Pereira. It's very simple. Finding the ink rolls is fairly easy compared to finding a place to get your platen replaced. I'm not sure what the platen is. You could probably build one though, now that I have a milling machine. Michael P says, incidentally, Kurgan also said my last name correctly first time. Truly a well-cultured man. Well, thank you. I'll take your compliment gracefully. Thoughts on St. George, the great martyr? I don't know much about St. George other than my wife's grandfather was named George, and apparently he killed a dragon. Whether that was a real dragon, a big crocodile, some demonic thing, I don't know. I really don't know enough about St. George, but I don't know enough about all of the saints. I have a book that maybe is sitting there. No, it's not here. I think it's downstairs. This office is too small for my books. Even just my reference books don't fit in here. Something about heroes and saints or something like that of the Catholic Church. And yeah, I really need to read more about the saints. It's very enlightening to... Whenever you read about the saints, it's very inspiring. It's I should do more of it. It's, again, time, you know. If you guys just all subscribe, send me like a few million euro, dollars, gold coins, whatever, you know, then I've got the time to read more and give you the, you know, Reader's Digest idiot's guide version to things. Where am I like that you guys are interacting quite well. I enjoy this. Dan Pereira, I would try Pereira and then just ask you. The Kurgan, the platen is the rubber roller on the typewriter. Oh, after a few decades, they harden and ruin the typeface. Ah, that could possibly explain a few things. You're closer than most. It was an escaped iguana. I'm not sure what that's referring to. XD says, should we be worried about Russia and Putin? Do you think there will be a World War III? My guess is there is a 40% chance. Well, I think World War III started about 2 years ago. It's just you don't recognize it as war because you're thinking of tanks down the street. It's a different kind of war. It's more of an information and biological warfare now, and it's been going on for a while. Will it escalate to tanks down the street? You know, the Russians have moved, I'm trying to remember the place where they've moved their, I forget the name in Russian, but they're called Dagger missiles, those hypersonic missiles. They've got a 2,000-mile range, which means where they are now located, at least where some of them are now located, they can hit any city in Europe. You know, including all of the United Kingdom, Spain, Portugal, all of Europe. Any country in Europe can be hit by these hypersonic missiles, which can be mounted with an atomic warhead. And the Russians have been super diplomatic. They've followed international law. They're being extremely, I think, kind to the rest of Europe that has put sanctions on them, the Americans and so on. And now with the recent, one of the other things that was in the news was the assassination of Dugin's daughter. Now, Dugin was never, you know, he was feted in the West, but in Russia is considered a bit of an idiot. You know, I'm sorry his daughter died. I don't think, you know, that's goes without saying. But apparently she was also a bit of a, shall we say, not pro-European type person. I don't know enough about it, but definitely that was an assassination attempt on what is considered, at least from a PR perspective, a politically important figure. And, you know, Vox made a comment on his blog saying, oh, well, this opens up the route for the Russians to do the same, because, you know, if you're going after normal citizens in Russia with assassinations, you know, that once the enemy uses a tool of war, you're free to use it as well. You know, why shouldn't you? And that opens up the door for Russia to start assassinations, and that's very bad news. And my personal belief was like, well, if I was Putin, I think I would have started out that way. You know, it's like most of Europe is supposedly at war with Russia, certainly economically, and by sending weapons and whatever and money to Russia, which, you know, the weapons that are getting to the Ukraine are just being funneled somewhere else, and there are Ukrainian veterans that are actually saying that, but, you know, this all gets censored. You can't even get Russia TV or Russia television news anymore in Europe anywhere. You have to go to Gab or, you know, use a VPN or whatever. Again, why are you censoring stuff if you're confident in your position? You know, there was never any chance that Ukraine was going to win against Russia, or that Europe is going to win against Russia. If America manages to push their little puppets that run the European governments into a war with Russia, that will just mean, again, that, you know, America is willing to fight a war with Russia to the last European, or to, like they're doing to the last Ukrainian. You know, it's like there's no way that Russia would lose a war against, I think, even the whole of Europe combined, quite frankly. Because you know, if it became really ugly, they can literally nuke every major city in Europe in minutes, and we can't stop it. No one can. There is no technology that stops hypersonic missiles at the moment. These things are moving at like 14,000 plus kilometers per hour and taking evasive maneuvers constantly while doing that, and they can be fitted with nukes. So, you know, the UK, some top UK military guys recently said, we have to prepare for war with Russia, and our armies, our men need to be fit and ready to go operational at any minute. Yeah, well, good luck. Because apart from the fact that I wouldn't rate an English soldier today against a Russian soldier for any amount of time on the battlefield, they would get wiped out. I don't think that the whole of Western Europe has got any clue what the Russian military is like, what they're capable of, and the fact that up to now they're using their like third-rate guys, and they're just like toying with the whole thing. They're certainly not using their best forces or anything like that. I don't think they're even using their special forces guys, except maybe to be like recon guys or spotters or so on, in a limited case. But I think Russia could potentially take out America as well. I don't think that America has got the manpower or the technology to counter Russia, especially when you consider that Russia and China are currently doing military exercises together and doing a big show of it. With Russia, they're starting to agree to a new form of currency that releases the petrodollar. So the dollar is going to crash, which means the euro is going to crash, which means the pound is going to crash, while the ruble is now valued more than it ever has been, I think. And Putin has done some very clever things, like he's linked the value of 1 ounce of gold to the rubles to the value of about $1,400, $1,500, while the rest of the world, American petrodollar world, says it's worth 1,900. So he's just devalued the dollar like in one fell swoop. And he's obviously been planning this for some time. China is clearly on board with Russia, and I think that they're going to take over Taiwan, probably in an almost bloodless coup, if you like, because I don't think that Taiwan, unless they're pushed by the usual neocons and the usual suspects, what I'm talking about, that are infesting the U.S. government, the foreigners that run the USA, are going to push. They don't care about anybody except themselves and their own little state. So unless they push Taiwan to do something suicidal, but China can take Taiwan anytime it wants. It's just that the Chinese mindset is very different from the Western European one. They look at not even 20 years. They probably look at the 200-year solution view. And so why take Taiwan? Why waste manpower, lives, and bombs and so on when it can just assimilate it eventually? It's like the Borg. Like we don't have to fight you. We just slowly, just amorphically take over. And like my father said, 30, 40 years ago, China doesn't have to go to war. They've got like almost 2 billion people. All they need to do is give their guys passports, and they've invaded. And that's what's happening in Venice. There's so many Chinese people. In Toronto, it's like when I first went to Canada and I landed in Toronto, it was like my sister, whose geography is on par with her peers, let's say, when she went to Canada for whatever reason, I can't remember, she was in Quebec or Toronto, and she says she got out and she was like, I thought I took the wrong plane. I was like, oh my God, did I get the wrong plane? Am I in China now? Like, where am I? And she didn't recognize Toronto as being Canadian. And I understood why, because, I've been there a few times, and yeah, it's got a very Chinese look. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about nuclear war for 2 reasons. I mean, from a personal perspective, again, if you know anything about actual nukes and so on, even if they nuked Rome, which is not that far from me, it wouldn't affect me immediately. Look at Chernobyl, the scaremongering that Chernobyl was on. Oh, we're going to have mutants, everybody's going to die. There's people that carried on living there. There's animals there, there's plant life there. Yeah, some people died of cancer, but life will find a way. So even if they nuke, let's say every capital in Europe gets hit by a nuke, yeah, Russia goes flat out against America. Every capital in Europe gets hit by a nuke, and Washington, D.C., New York, L.A., San Francisco, all those gets also wiped out by nukes. Whatever happens in America, well, that's America's problem. I live in Europe. So even if every capital city in Europe was hit by a nuke, I'm not saying it wouldn't be very bad times, but that wouldn't kill me off or most of the population of my country, or most of the population of any of the other countries that got hit by them. Maybe some really small countries like, say, Slovakia, Slovenia, they would be disproportionately affected. Maybe a country like Ireland, where a lot of the population is, say, in Dublin. Certainly London would take a big hit because there's about 10 million people there. So if you assume that all 10 million got wiped out, that would affect about 1/6 of the population of the UK. It would be less than that if Rome was hit, because not 10 million people live in Rome. But, life would carry on. And despite the fact that Russia militarily certainly has the ability to nuke every capital city in Europe, I don't think they have the manpower to hold the whole of Europe, especially when you're going to go up against people like what are those guys in Spain that have been fighting, the ETA guys, the Basque, people like the Basque, certain types of Italians, the Sicilians, certain types of Greeks, the Venetians, the Portuguese, some French, even certainly some Germans. There's going to be a lot of, resistance, freedom fighters, so to speak. And the Russians are not stupid. They understand this, which is why they're going about with the Ukraine the way they're doing it. They're going about the Ukraine conflict in a very measured way, very calm and very slow, and they're taking their time because they're not going to risk their men by rushing forward and then having enemy sitting behind them, sort of thing. So they're doing a very gradual takeover, and then the land that they get, they control and they keep it and they control it. So it's it would be very, very foolish to go to war with Russia, which is not to say that our governments are completely idiotic. They are, and they're also absolutely corrupt. But I think, to be frank with you, I don't know if you nuked Rome, because there's a lot of history there, a lot of stuff. But if, let's say, I don't know, Russia had some magic weapon that just killed every member of the Italian government and every member of, I'm not sure that the entire population. They really don't like me saying that if Russia took over, I'd just ask for Venice as a protectorate of Russia. They really don't want me to be saying that, I think. But from 20 dropped down to 12. But I'm still here, guys. One down vote. Maybe the down voter is back. I don't know. Where was I? There's quite a few comments. Let's see. All right. Matthias. A point about Nazis I'd thank a lot if you knew about is that the gas chambers never existed, that there were rooms for something else in camps intentionally mistaken as gas chambers, as there were no proof they were used to kill, as they were famously used. Do you know something about that? Sorry for my English. Yes, Matthias, I've read about that. Of course, David Eyring talks about that in some detail, and he was, of course, jailed. And what does it mean to be a Holocaust denier? I mean, David Eyring never said the Holocaust didn't happen. He never said there wasn't concentration camps. He never said the Nazis didn't kill people. As do I. I think a lot of people were killed. Definitely there were concentration camps. The situation there was horrific. But yeah, I've read about the stuff you're talking about. I don't think that necessarily we can discuss that in any detail on YouTube. If you're on Gab, you can find me there and, probably get a few more questions answered there. AJ says, hello, everyone. Hello, AJ Rhino. How you doing? Michael P says, have you read Carl Adam? No, I'm not familiar with that name. Sam Werb says, which saint's name did you take at confirmation? I'm to be confirmed at next Easter, and I'm considering Saint Camillus. I'm not familiar with Saint Camillus. I took Saint Adrianus, which was one of the earlier saints. He was the captain of the guard of the Eastern Emperor, and they were busy torturing Christians to death who would not renounce the name of Jesus. And he was so impressed he converted there and then on the spot and got tortured to death for his troubles. He is the patron saint of warriors, epileptics, butchers. And yeah, I just like this story. Him and his wife Natalia were both are both saints of both the Eastern and Western churches. XD says, true, good points, sir. I don't know what. Oh, you're talking probably about my conversation with Rush. A proxy war is what we're in. Yeah, indeed. Last point I want to make, the creation of NATO was one of the most important things in our lifetime. Yes and no. I mean, I personally never cared a jot about it, and I still don't. I know what you're saying, you know, it's relevant politically or whatever, but I have always avoided the whole entire political class, and, you know, I'm still trying to avoid it until they come to my doorstep, and then, well, I won't be able to avoid it, I guess. Jordan says, do you know of any other books written on exorcism other than Malachi's Hostage to the Devil? Well, there is the original Roman Rite book for the rites of exorcism, which I have downstairs again, I think. Yeah, I have that, the original in Latin, and another version that I think might be Novus Ordo, which I'm not really fond of. Exorcism is a very dangerous topic, and I'll try and stay away from it. That's my advice usually. But no, I'm not aware of any specific book that deals with exorcism as such, and I would be very, very careful about delving into any book that says it's dealing with that sort of thing. Daniel Pereira says they can't hit the Azores. Fire away. Yeah, let me see where the Azores are on my map. I get them confused with that. You might be right. Yeah, I think you're right. I guess we know where you are now. Stalin's daughter lives in Portland, Oregon. She's a hippie. I think she converted to Catholicism, actually, although probably the wrong Catholicism, but I'm not sure that at the time she did, she could tell the difference. Daniel Pereira says, donating of our crappy old weapons, watching CNN too much, or BBC. Ukraine will not win, has not won, cannot win. Even if Europe sticks up behind it, it won't. And in fact, it's about to capitulate, I think. It's probably still a few months away, or maybe the neoliberal world order will pull something else out of the bag, but yeah. Wenzel says, have been reading on scalar waves, which I recall you mentioning in one of your early streams. Yep, I've got all the books of Thomas Bearden now. He passed away recently. Are you familiar with the work of the German professor Konstantin Mail? Yes, I am, quite a bit. Any thoughts on it? Yes, I think it's good. He is also, if you go on my blog, gfilotto.com, you go onto the search function there, there's a thing that says search me, and you type in ancient radios, you'll see a blog post there about the fact that I think as a result of Mail's work, I agree that I think it's probable that the ancients had a ways to communicate by radio through their temples, which would explain a bunch of stuff that we take as legends, but I think were real. Daniel Pereira says, I'm more operational right now than 3/4 of any NATO army. I'd say, you know, if you're fit, you can run with a bag on your back, and you can shoot halfway straight, you're probably in the top 1% of NATO personnel. And if you have any knowledge of strategy or tactics, Michael P. says Ukraine will ultimately be a dead nation if they push Russia out, since it would require the mobilization of a significant portion of the population. I don't know if you're keeping up with facts, my friend, but there are Ukrainian high command people that have seen the writing on the wall, They are estimating that Ukraine has already lost about 200,000 men dead in action and about another 300,000 wounded beyond being able to go back to the front. That's 500,000 people, 500,000 men, soldiers. Ukraine's not going to win anything. And the loss of a large portion of those guys, they've already lost a large portion of those guys. And it's just going to keep getting worse. And Putin has said this. I said, look, we don't really want to kill you guys, but you are going to be denazified. So either give up and go home or die. You know, it's pretty much, it's a generous offer, I think. Daniel Pereira says, Toronto is nothing but Indians and Chinese with a sprinkling of Caribbeans. I don't know, I think I met a Palestinian there. Michael P. says, Vancouver is 1/3 Chinese. Luke in WV, I'm not sure if that's Wisconsin, I don't know. Volkswagen? Luke in a Volkswagen? I'm hoping for a Systema-related stretch goal for the energy project. Yeah, I don't see that those tie together, but Luke, if you're the Luke that I think you are, you're gonna get not just 2 hours, you're gonna get 4 hours of Skype time if you are the guy that made that very generous contribution. So I'm gonna be writing to you and individually if you are that Luke once the Kickstarter closes down. But yeah, hey, you know, if you are that guy, those hours on Skype, they can be about the gasifier or whatever you want. I'm really not partial, you know. As long as I know what I'm talking about, I'm happy to do that. XD says, Michael P, that's concerning. And Daniel Pereira says, even if they nuked Rome, there is still 500,000 Italians left in Canada. Well, I think there may be something like 50 or 60 million or 30 million. It's some ridiculous amount of Italians in Brazil and a bunch of them in Argentina. There's more Italians living outside of Italy than there are Italians living in Italy. If every Italian went back home to Italy, the country would explode. Or maybe we'd just take over the government and return back to our roots. Michael P, more than that. It's 70% where I live. Oh, sorry. Michael P says Argentina is basically Spanish-speaking Italians. Yeah, and Daniel Pereira says more than that. It's 70% where I live. Marco de Bas says Basques. Yes, thank you. Russia hates Anglo-Saxons. That's not true. I think the Anglo-Saxons, led by a certain other tribe, certainly hate Russia and have hated them from the beginning for a very, very long time. I don't think that Russia hates the Anglo-Saxons or really anybody else. Russia just wants to be left alone and be Russian. That's fair enough. Scotch Girl, random and off topic, that this is the stream for it, but I like what I can see of your furniture. Is it English? Yes, it is. All the furniture you see in here was bought in the UK and we sent it out here. And it was a lot cheaper than buying new furniture here. I mean, that desk over there is a writing desk. That top part opens, you've got two little things that come out. You know what, I'm going to show you, because you're a lady of culture, obviously. See, these things come out here. This goes over like this, and you've now got a writing desk, which I've used when I was still in the UK and working from home, and we just moved to a nice big house, but it was unfurnished, and I bought this. I used that as my working desk for a few weeks at least, and it worked very well. Similar to this thing, and you know, these things were like 50 pounds, 40 pounds, and of course the desk I'm on, which you can't see, but is one of those old double desks that they used in the old, I don't know if they were trading or commercial offices or whatever, but it's beautiful. It really is. It's got like drawers on one side, a big compartment on the other side, a drawer in front of me and a drawer to the left, and mirrored on the other side, which is against the wall in my case, but in theory 2 people worked at this desk, and it's got like green leather inserts on a wooden thing. It's quite beautiful, and I got it for that specific reason, because I like it. So well noticed, Scotch girl. JG, you know, which would be sad because I have quite a few friends there, and but yeah, I can see his thinking. Launching nukes against the US would probably mean that some nukes get thrown at Russia. I don't know what their defense capabilities against that are. They could be enough that they don't care, so I don't know. But yeah, I would think probably England. Well, it depends. You know, the Russians are very lateral thinkers, so they might just do something where they don't cause as much damage, but they warn everybody off. I don't think they would hit Rome or Athens because they're not strategically important. And maybe instead of London, they might nuke that place that's got the huge golf balls, which is a military base, you know, with the supercomputers that look like giant golf balls in England. That would be a thing to like hit with a small tac nuke and go like, yeah, stop bugging us, or the next one is going to be at number 10 Downing Street. That might be the way they go. I don't know. I think it depends a lot on how effective their defenses against nukes are. Daniel Pereira, the degree to which the Ukrainian population has been mauled is truly shocking. If it were my nation, I'd be knocking on Zelensky's door with a baseball bat in my hand. Well, funnily enough that you're talking about that, I was talking to an Italian guy who, he's got this Ukrainian who comes for certain training for the war, but you know, he's been here 6 months. I don't think he's going anywhere. What I find shocking about the Ukrainian population is that they seem to be as brainwashed as all the other people that are waving the Ukrainian flag. And yeah, you know, this guy's a military sort of strategist and whatever. And you know, I was talking with him, and he was telling me about this Ukrainian guy who's saying, yeah, you know, like what we should do and how do we fight the war against Russia and whatever. And this Italian strategist basically said to him, well, if I was you, mate, the first guy I'd want to be taking out is your president, because that guy's going to get you all killed. And I agree with him. You know, again, and you know, my comment to that was, look, there would be no wars if it was a rule that in order to go to war, the leader of a country has to be right at the head with a bright red big feather on top and a target on his chest that said, I'm the guy that started this. Then there would be no wars. Daniel Pereira says 30 million ITAs in Brazil, no way. Why don't you Google it? I can't remember, it's a huge number. Scotch Gold says, nice, thank you very much. £50, that's a steal. Yeah, this was like, I don't want to lie to you now, that I think one of them might have been 70. I can't remember. Maybe it was that one. One was certainly 50, and I've got another one downstairs, which is another writing desk, but without the display cabinet on top, which was my first buy. I think it was on eBay, and I think I got that one for like £40. Yeah, you know, if you went to IKEA and you bought new furniture, it wouldn't look this cool, and it would cost you more. And I did that calculation, so it was cheaper to ship the stuff out here than come out here and buy new stuff. So that's what I did. Somewhere, there are at least 1 million Italians in the Steel Valley, the Cleveland to Pittsburgh corridor. Yes, but Italians that have lived in America long enough, they're Americans now. Michael P. says, Daniel Pereira, history tells us my people are better off without the Muscovites. Depends who you ask. Matthias, I'm so thankful for your knowledge and your attitude. Oh, thank you very much. I'm touched. And thank you for that very graceful comment. XD says, I would argue German is the biggest European ethnic group spread across the globe. I don't know. I never think about the Germans on purpose. Possibly. Certainly a lot of them left, but you know, a lot of them also were wiped out during the Second World War, so I don't know. Certainly a lot of German people in Brazil, although they speak Brazilian. Portuguese. Michael P. Ukrainians have a Cossack heritage. There is nothing more we hate as a foreigner trying to tell us what to do. Well, the fact is that Ukraine was part of, certainly East Ukraine was part of Russia, and in fact those people chose to remain part of Russia, and that's why they got Russian passports. So, Michael, I think, you know, like a lot of East Bloc people, you have certain very narrow views about certain topics that no one's going to change your mind about, but that doesn't mean that you're not wrong. Or that you are wrong, rather. Well, that is unless you are Zelensky, the Jewish man. Okay. Daniel Pereira, 23 million in Brazil, 20 million in Argentina. There you go. 43 million. I think Italy has shade under 60 million Italians, and that's just 2 countries out there. I guarantee you there's a bunch of Italians in England, there's a bunch of, in Kazakhstan, there's a bunch of Italians working out there. I know there's a lot of Italians in other South European countries. We're pretty much everywhere. You know, the Italians are, especially the Venetians, are people that have traveled all over the place. Scotch girl, like Henry V, wasn't he the last English king to lead his men into battle? I don't know, possibly. And if so, I've just gained a bit of respect for one of the English kings. But yeah, that's how it should be, you know. In feudal times, it sort of was like that because the baron had to lead his men. And, you know, I'm not saying it always happened. Certainly some guys fought from the back, but it wasn't uncommon then. You know, Charles Martel, people like that, they fought from the front. Bohemond, you know, the Crusaders, a lot of heroic guys, that Tancredi, these are famous crusaders that they didn't shirk in battle. They certainly didn't. So, yeah. Let's say that if there were wars by men being, you know, leaders being at the front of the thing, at least they would be worthwhile wars with men fighting it, you know, not like some ignorant morons that got just roped into it because, well, we're gonna show you the world, you know, travel to new countries, shoot little foreign people. How about a word from the QED? I'd like to hear convert. OED? Sorry, Pharmagrady, I'm not sure what you're asking me. How about a word from the OED? I'd like to hear convert. What does... Oh, Oxford English Dictionary. Ah, convert. Let's look that up. Let's see what it says. Oh, I've also taken up a new hobby that I've wanted to do for many years. It'll probably end in despair and death. But here in this, I don't know what it looks like on your screen, but this is actually lime green. On my screen here now it looks yellow. I don't know. Anyway, in this little pot, I have taken a peach from my friend Alfredo's side because they're just rotting on the tree otherwise, and he's dead. And I ate it, and I put the seed in here, and I plan every time I come into this little office to water it a little bit, and eventually have a peach bonsai. If this plant survives, I'll be very impressed because the only things that have survived as plants that I was looking after were cacti, which I watered maybe once a month. Anyway, convert. Let's look that up. Now, you have to excuse me because this writing is very tiny and my eyesight close-up is becoming a little bit less than optimal because as I age, I see better further away than I do nearby. I probably need to go and visit. Let's see, CA still, oh no, we've got a way to go. CI, aha, we're approaching coloring, Commodore, Compagne, French word I thought, compatible, con, oh. Just con goes on for a whole page and a bit. That's interesting. Concaptive, concarnation, concavity. see. Conceit. Concentric. Are we going to hit conclude? We're going to hit concubine probably at some point. Concupiscence. No. Conning. Contraindicate. We've gone too far. Convey over there. Converting. Here we go. Let's see. Converting. Convert. Oh, good God. Let's see where convert starts. Convert goes on for more than one page. So I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes. Convert, also 6. Convert, spelled differently. Convertire from the Latin. To turn about, turn in. Turn in character or nature, transform, translate, etc. Together, altogether. Vertere, to turn in position or direction. So that's one that was first used, or the first thing that came in 1382 in Wycliffe, and then it gives the example. 2, to turn, direct, reflect, to turn one's attention. So, well, I think we know the meaning of convert. If there's a specific, like I said, it goes on and on and on and on. So, yeah, probably not a great word to read through the whole thing. It would be quite boring. Scotch Girl says, hey, Farmer Grady, yes, I recognize both of you from Social Galactic. Daniel Pereira, 75 million people with an Italian ancestry outside of Italy. And I think a lot of them have actual passports. XD says, I'm half German, half Italian. I live in New York. You poor soul. It's like hell. Michael P., who is your favorite Venetian Doge? I don't know enough about them. I have had a book about Venice for, I think the might be, I think it's more than 10 years for sure. I may have had that book for almost 20 years and I never got a chance to read it. It's this thick in very small font. I just haven't quite got to it, so I don't know enough about the various doges. There were some very cool ones though, just very broad pictures. I know that all the doges had to renounce any kind of money. They couldn't take any money while they were doge and so on, you know, to avoid sort of favoritism and so on. Daniel Pereira to XD says, welcome to the half Italian master race. Just met an Italian living in my town. He's a chef of all things. Well, yeah. Daniel Pereira, oh, that was aged in the sun. Daniel Pereira looks yellow. Commodore 64 is in there. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about now. It surprises me with the amount of Italians with blue eyes too. Notice that? Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. My mother's got blue eyes. Somewhere in me, I have a recessive blue gene because obviously, you know, my mother and my father. So potentially, you know, my wife's got blue eyes. Potentially, I could have a child with blue eyes. Haven't had one yet with blue eyes. But, you know, my brother, for example, who, you know, he's got a child with blue eyes, and neither him nor his wife have got blue eyes, but they both have the recessive blue eye from one of their parents. So, you know, if one of your parents has got blue eyes, you've got that gene somewhere in your system. And if you get together with another person that's got also the recessive gene, there are 4 chances that there's one chance in four that your child will have blue eyes, because they can either have brown, or they can have brown-blue, which would still look brown, or blue-brown, which would still look brown, and only the combination of blue-blue would result in blue eyes. Now, funnily enough, my daughter, they probably look a little bit brown on there, but most of my eyes actually a light shade of green. And my daughter has got a little bit of that already, so I think as she gets older, it'll probably get lighter. And yeah, that's because, especially in the north of Italy, the Normans, the Franks, the Germans, they all came through the north of Italy, and from the time of the Crusades till 200 years later, I mean, my ancestors, we can track them historically through, genealogy books and the books of noble families, came to Italy in the year about 1200, when the Crusaders were returning from the Ottoman. They're mostly the guys that were in the Crusades, and the guys that were returning were basically the same people, a few generations down the line. And then my family went up north. I mean, my great-grandfather was a huge guy. My granddad, and is not, for people now, he's not considered a big or a tall guy. But for the average Italian back in his day, he was considered a quite tall man. I'm 6'2", which again is big for an Italian even today. So we definitely have that bloodline somewhere in there. Maybe. Oh, error making local recording. Okay. David Pereira says, yeah, my mom and her whole family have all got blue eyes as well, apparently. OED woman. Oh, you guys and your Oxford English. Let me just see what else is going on. Scotch Girl says, thanks, Gergen. Got to run. Been ages since I caught one of your lives. God bless. Thank you, Scotch Girl. I really enjoyed your questions, actually. XD says, I also had blonde hair as a baby. Yeah, so did I. I've had blonde hair since up to the age of 6, 7, something like that. It turned light brown around the age of 5. Yeah, similarly. My boy's got blonde hair. This is very interesting. That would probably explain why Italians have blue eyes. So much history. It's insane. I don't. There's people that know a lot more history than I do. And keep in mind, I dropped history at school because I had this gay teacher who wanted to teach me about the Bolsheviks and how everybody's equal. And even then, I had an instinctive rejection of communism and everything that goes with it. You do have Nordic features, especially given your height. Yeah, I guess. My nose is a bit more... squashed than you would expect, because I broke it 4 times, but there you go. Light blonde baby, now my hair is very dark blonde, looks brown, but still has a golden sheen. Daniel Pereira, when my family is from, they have had blue eyes since before the Greeks arrived. Yeah, there's, there is that, and there are people in Afghanistan that have like green eyes. One of the most famous pictures of National Geographic, of course, was the girl with the green eyes. Iran has got people with green eyes like that. There's been a whole bunch of mixing of peoples and so on, but I do hope that the blonde hair, blue-eyed people continue to survive, because in Sweden they're becoming a bit weak, I think. And, there is certainly traces of it in my bloodline, because my kid definitely has got Viking tendencies. Raiding, taking gold, being insanely... I don't know if pride is the right thing, but certainly he's got a very good sense of self, put it that way. Michael P says, I used to look Nordic when I was younger with my blue eyes and blonde hair, now less so. Daniel Pereira was in Afghanistan. There were people there who were blonde, blue-eyed, green, everything. Yep, green eyes is the most rare, correct? I don't know. Probably I'm at least a bit German. I don't know if green eyes are the most rare, but I know that eyes change color with time. And one of the first places I came across this, because I noticed it in myself first. I had brown eyes as a kid, and my eyes are not brown anymore. Especially if I'm tired or pissed off, or the joke in our family goes that we're kind of got some Hulk genetics, because when we get really pissed off, our eyes go green. It's not a joke. My dad's the same. But I've got even lighter eyes than he does. And I also saw it in my karate instructor, which started out with brown eyes, and over the years that I knew him, he started to go more yellow-green as well. And I noticed this, and then I read in O'Neill's book on Nikola Tesla, Prodigal Genius. It's a brilliant book, and I think still the best biography of Tesla. There's a passage where he says he goes to interview Tesla, and he did several times over the years. And Tesla had some respect for him, because apparently he was one of the few journalists that actually tried to tell his story accurately. And O'Neill said to him, "But you've got blue eyes now. I thought you had black eyes when I last saw you." And Nikola Tesla said, "Yes, I did. But, with thinking, as a man thinks, the more he thinks and the more evolved he becomes, the lighter his eyes become." Which sounds like, woo-woo weird stuff. But I think O'Neill wasn't lying when he wrote that. I just don't... From the kind of writing he does, he seems to be a very pedestrian, very matter-of-fact. Oh, they really don't want me to talk about the Overlords of Mars series and the changing eye color stuff. Obviously, high stuff that they don't want you to know about. But yeah, I've written about the change of eye colors in my science fiction books in the Overlords of Mars series. And yes, I will get to write that third book one day. Like I said, if you guys buy my books by the pallets, then I can just concentrate on writing more books, But otherwise, I have to dig the earth to eat. So, the Vikings were known for drawing on the walls in permanent marker. Well, yes, he does that and a bunch of other stuff besides. Red eyes are most rare. Don't forget the albinos. Indeed. XD says that's freaking awesome. Matthias says, what's the name of the book about Tesla you just mentioned? It's called Prodigal Genius by O'Neill. Can't remember what the guy's first name is. It's quite hard to get now, but I read it, almost 30 years ago, and I think I still have a copy because I bought it again because it was such a good book. A lot of my books got lost in a flood, because my brother very intelligently put all my books in storage in a valley near a river. So when it flooded, all my shit went to shit. I had a lot of reference books. I've read thousands of books, and I've left probably a couple of thousand books behind in various countries each time I moved. So I'm going to have to build an extension into this house just to keep the books that I want to keep if I ever get... I'd need a lot of money to rebuy the books that I've lost and gone down the drain somewhere, but yeah. XD. Seeming the Anglo-Saxons was a German tribe in England, and most English are descendants of them. Does that mean English people are German in origin? No, the English people are a bit of a bastardized race, because they had their own... I forget what they're called, the Britons or whatever, and they got invaded by pretty much everybody. So a little bit like the Venetians mixed with everybody. The English got invaded by everybody. So they're a mixture of people there, I think. I don't think they're necessarily German in origin. I mean, they were invaded by the Romans for a long time. The Vikings, the Nordics, invaded them. So they're a mixture of things. Deputy Dave says, I can testify to that. My eyes are dark blue, but they turn green if I'm angry. Yeah, it's, there's obviously blood flow has something to do with it, or I don't know, maybe emotions. There are, that's another point. That's a good point. Schizophrenics, people that literally have different personalities, and I'm not talking about the ones that just make shit up, talking about ones that are real schizophrenics. In some cases, their eye color changes quite drastically. I've read that before, and it's apparently been documented. So there's definitely something about that. And of course, I take my take on it in the Overlords of Mars series. Now, in the Overlords of Mars series, there are real science bits that you don't know about that are in there, and at the end of the book, you get to figure out, you know, which are the real science bits and which are my speculations, because there are little interludes in the book about stuff. So that's quite interesting. Anyway, if you're interested in my take on the eye color change, it's in the book. Overlords of Mars, the first one, I think I put it in there. Yeah, the Inception. The second one is Stasis. The third one, working title, Black Sun, Nazis on the Moon. But I have to find the time to finish that book, and it's involved because the plot lines in my books are long and complicated, and they all resolve sort of towards the end. Eyes do change color. I've noticed my eyes are blue and changes to gray sometimes. Is there a reason for that, spiritually or physically? Possibly both, as I've been saying. Scraping the dirt for food isn't so bad. Well, I'd rather ponder the clouds as I write my thoughts for you guys to peruse. Daniel says, I have a suspicion it has to do with blood flow behind the eyeballs as well as the body's hydration level. Yeah, possibly. It means they have common ancestors. I wouldn't call them Germans. Yeah. What part of the, XD says, what part of history did we lose during the burning of all the books of Alexandria? A lot of it. A lot of it. God knows if we'll ever get any of that stuff back, but it was an incalculable loss. And of course, I do blame the Muslims for it because they were the ones who did it. A Nazi did put us on the moon. Yes, more than one, but not the way you think. You know, I've got the video on that. I think it's video number 3 in my video series here that I discuss what I think happened about the moon landings. Anyway, I've been going for a long time. I don't know how long because of the interruptions. It says 5 minutes, but I think it's probably closer to 2 hours. Yep, if not 2 and something. That kills me inside, knowing we lost all that history. Yeah, it's tragic, but you know, it's a little bit, if you guys have been following the whole Mandela effect, or as I call it, the Mandala effect. They call it the Mandela affect. I call it the Mandala effect, which you know, says that like Moonraker, there's no way that anybody can tell me that in Moonraker, the Jaws guy didn't kiss a girl that had braces. That was the whole point of how the film ended. And I remember watching that film. She had braces. Now apparently she doesn't. And there was a series that I watched on Netflix, I think, I don't remember, it was a while back, about these time travelers, but the way they can travel through time is only by like downloading themselves into a living person's brain, and they basically push them out of their consciousness. So they take over this guy's body. And they're doing this from a distant, you know, not too distant future that is really bad news, because they want to avoid this cataclysmic apocalypse sort of thing. And they keep failing and failing and failing, and the whole series goes on like this until they ultimately completely fail. And then the computer just goes, iteration number X, you know. And so it's like that whole point of all those people getting sent back in time, and it all ended up in failure. That was just like one iteration of the computer that's just going to keep trying this until it gets it right. Now, if you're familiar with my role-playing game book, which I think I may have on here. Yes, there you go. If you guys haven't bought something that makes you laugh and that you can play with your friends, there you go. Go ahead and buy this. Yes, Surviving the Current Zombie Apocalypse. It's a role-playing game. It's got very sexy photograph on the front, a very cool guy, some stuff on the back, and it's got artwork, color artwork inside, which is why it's $28. But it's funny, it's a good game, it's easy to play, and you can have fun with your friends. And in there, I discuss, oh, I lost my train of thought now, remind me. What was I talking about? Color, eye color. Nazis on the moon. Oh yeah, I was also yeah, the Mandela effect. So there's a guy in there that, you know, I talk about Looking Glass, which is a guy in the 90s that was talking about how these elite evil rulers of the world have got this supercomputer that they can just run that tells them all the iterations of what's going to happen, and no matter what they do, eventually they're going to lose and there's going to be this great awakening. But they can keep wasting time. So it's almost like maybe they have that, you know, the CERN Hadron Collider being the supposed time machine that resets everything, and they keep changing the timeline until they get to do what they want in their evil schemes, or at least they get to prolong their existence. And some of us keep remembering a little bit of these past timelines that are no more, which would make sense because our DNA, according to Peter Garayev, which is a Russian guy who sent me his book in Russian, by the way, about the wave genome, and he's a very interesting guy. If you're interested in the stuff, I suggest you buy my other book, the Systema book, because I talk about that in there. He has basically concluded that our junk DNA is essentially creating micro wormholes that can be affected in time and with the timeline, which is why like reverse timeline hypnosis works and can actually change your DNA. There you go. Cliff's notes, and probably confuse the crap out of all of you, but there you go. A lot of interesting shit there. Do you guys think maybe the burning of the Library of Alexandria was a false flag, meaning they had copies stashed somewhere else? No, I don't think so. Do you have Instagram? I would like to follow you in more ways other than YouTube. I've got Telegram, and let me see. Oh, I have to. This might crash the stream, but if one of you guys has got the Telegram link, can you just ping it in the chat so that XD gets to see it? Because otherwise I have to start Telegram on the laptop here, and it usually bombs a bunch of things out. I don't know why. Or oof, it's 2 in the morning here. I think I better hit the sack soon. Let's see. Maybe I can just copy it. Oh, go away. Okay, maybe I'll just type it out. That might be quicker. Where can you find my books, etc.? Okay, go here. I'll tell you what. This. There. That's my blog. And if you go to my blog, there's a thing on the left that says books I wrote. Click on there. And I think it's up to date. And I think I've got most of my books. But anyway, that's my surname, Filotto. If you type that in Amazon, you'll find most of my books. Sometimes you have to also type G.Filotto. Sometimes you have to type Giuseppe Filotto. But anyway, that's where you find my stuff. And let me give you the Telegram thing, although I use it relatively infrequently, but I tell people when I'm going to stream and stuff like that. https:// oh, I've done that wrong, haven't I? t.me / no. There, I think that's the Telegram group. Got it. Thank you. Really enjoyed the stream. You're most welcome. And thank you all for coming on here. I noticed we got our one downvoter back. Maybe he was taking a hiatus, but he's returned. Although I think if it was that guy, good old 13.8, I think he went offline of YouTube completely, or he took down all his videos or something. I don't know, but maybe he's returned. Anyway, thank you all for being here. God bless every single one of you, and thanks for making such an enjoyable stream. Have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.